Crusoe e Trackmon. Welcome to Anglesey Circuit. My name's Andrew Crichton and I'm going to be taking you through this essential track day safety briefing. Okay, so here's the headlines for our essential safety briefing today. Signing in and administration. We're going to take a look at cars and personal preparation. Sighting laps, which will include the flag signals. Overtaking rules for today. Issues that may occur to you on the circuit, which would include recovery, as well as paddock rules as well. So let's make a start.
All pre-event registration and safety briefings have been moved online in advance of the event and is mandatory for all drivers. Event details and links will be sent out via email to participants before each event. On arrival, participants still need to register to collect their own wristband, which must be displayed throughout the event. You must still bring your driving licence for inspection on the day. You must observe 2-metre social distancing rules at all times. A member of staff will be present in the wristband collection area behind a Perspex safety screen to deal with any issues and queries only. Please affix your own wristband. Hand sanitizer will be widely available, however it is sensible to bring your own as well.
Okay, so now let's look at car preparation. Seatbelts, please make sure that those are done up at all times and in place. Drivers, your responsibility to make sure your passengers have got their seatbelts on as well. Please make sure you've got a towing eye fixed to the front bumper of the vehicle. If you don't know where that is, please make sure that you do before you go out on circuit and it is in place. Fixing a towing eye on a track day is a really important factor. Some of the time you may need to recover the car, so having that towing eye in place where people can find you is very important. Let's look at this. Most cars will have some kind of a toolkit like this, and you'll find tucked away in there a typical towing eye. It's a screw-in device. Beware, some cars may have a left-hand thread. This is a BMW Mini, and let's look. At the front of the car you'll find a small aperture. It's usually covered by a small plastic plate. Just prise that out. There's usually a tool in your toolkit for that, so you don't damage it. Insert the towing eye. Screw it in, takes a few screws. If you want to be really cautious about it, maybe just use a screwdriver to tighten it. One extra notch, job done. Side windows of the car need to be predominantly up. That's just to make sure your elbows don't come out of the car. Make sure that they're up, and if you need to leave them cracked open for ventilation, by all means, but make sure it is predominantly up. Loose objects in the car, anything flying around the cockpit of the car, could just hurt if it hits you, so make sure that's all out before you venture on track, and please double check the boot and make sure there's nothing there that would be an issue as well. Wheel nuts on the cars. A lot of people bring their cars to the circuit on trailers and maybe don't nip the wheel nuts up before they go out on track. Very embarrassing if the wheels fall off on the sighting lap, so make sure that you keep an eye on those throughout the course of the day. Alloy wheels will expand and contract and maybe back the wheel torques off, so make sure they're set. Tyre pressures, those will grow as you're out on circuit. They'll rise during the course of the day and that can affect the handling of the car. So keep an eye on those, use your manufacturer's pressures as your guide, and if they go too far above, balance them back down again so you get the best handling. Please make sure the car has got enough fuel in it before you venture out on circuit. It's embarrassing if you run out, particularly on the sighting laps. Keep an eye on that, and whilst we're talking about liquids, please make sure the lubricants and the coolants are up to level as well. We have some high G-force corners here at Anglesey Circuit, and going through those, if you've got low oil levels, that can be bad news for the engine, so make sure the lubricants are to the right level. But also keep an eye to make sure they're not coming out of the bottom of the car as well. And finally, cameras. We have no problem with you recording what you're doing out on circuit, but if you're using a camera, please make sure it's mechanically fixed to the car and that you use a secondary tether to make sure the camera stays in place and it doesn't break away. Now let's talk about your personal preparation. Wearing a helmet at all times when you're out on circuit is extremely important. Please make sure that you know precisely how that helmet is done up and make sure it is secure. As you can see, helmets have different means of attachment, so familiarise yourself with that before you go out on track. For those of you who may have a race car with a proper harness and hands device, again, make sure that is clipped into place on the helmet and secure under the harness before you venture out on track. Clothing. Depends really on whether you're in an open top or a closed top car. Let's cover open top cars first. Please make sure your arms and legs are covered when you're in car. Same for your passengers. And if you're in a car with a particularly exposed driving position, Caterhams and kit cars for example, please make sure you've got gloves on as well. If you're in an open top car, it's essential that you have a full face crash helmet on. Same for your passenger, particularly if there's no screen to it. If you're in a closed top car, by all means short sleeves are acceptable provided that you have the manufacturer's original door cards which are nicely moulded. If you've got fabricated or aftermarket door cards, please make sure you've got long sleeves on as well. And finally, hydration. It's very important, particularly on hot summer days, for your concentration to make sure that you keep yourself hydrated. So remember, keep drinking, but strictly no alcohol, please. Now let's look at sighting laps. We need to be ready to go for sighting laps, which means we need all the cars in the pit lane ready to go. You need to make sure that your helmet's on and you're set together with your passenger. Make sure they're properly equipped as well. If you're in a pit garage, joining the pit lane is very simple and straightforward. Please make sure that you turn left out of the pit garage to join the one-way system in that pit lane. If you're in the paddock, your access to the pit lane will be next to garage number 1. That's at the bottom of the pit lane garage complex. But please make sure that you're careful in that area because it's also where you will rejoin the paddock when you come off the circuit. So it's two-way traffic at that point. Thinking of which, if you happen to miss that junction when you come back in after a session, there is a secondary means of access to the paddock, which is next to garage number 22. So don't please reverse up and down the pit lane. Make sure you choose one of those two access points. In the paddock, just be careful. There may be spectators around and there may be young children, so please just be careful. Once you're ready to go for the sighting laps, you will see lights at the end of the pit lane, will lead you out onto the circuit and you'll be following the safety car. Please make sure that on the sighting laps there is strictly no overtaking. We call this ducks and drakes. We keep you in a single file because you need to be aware of the conditions out on track. We're going to do this at a sensible speed so everybody can understand that. And also anybody new to the circuit will get some idea of where the lines might be around the track as that's where the safety car will be leading you. We don't prolong the agony, just 3 laps around the track. That's twice past the pit lane here. We'll then bring you back into the pit lane before we get going with our sessions for the rest of the day. Entry onto the circuit. Please pay close attention to where the safety car is leading you and bear in mind the blend line which will be on your right hand side. Now depending on the configuration of the circuit we're going to be using today, the return off the track back into the pit lane can be a little complicated, so that extra care following the safety car is very important at this stage. Flags and lights. Now these are absolutely essential for you to understand because it's the only way that we can communicate with you whilst you're out on circuit. I mentioned lights, so if you see a flag and a light of the same colour, they mean the same thing. Let's look at the flags so that we know exactly what they are. On the sighting laps at every marshal's post today, you will see a green flag. That just alerts you to where the marshals are located for the day. Once we get going with the open sessions, a green flag would tell you that the circuit is clear after a cautionary period. So just be aware of that. A yellow flag is probably the most important flag from the organiser's point of view, but also for you out on circuit as well. Because a yellow flag is telling you that there is danger ahead. That could be supplemented by a yellow light as well. So be aware, please. A yellow flag means danger, in which case you need to slow down, pass whatever the problem is on circuit as carefully and sensibly as you can, and please make sure you do that in single file. So under yellow flag, strictly no overtaking. If there's a waved yellow flag, the problem is even more imminent, so you might even need to be prepared to stop, but just pass the problem carefully and sensibly and follow the marshal's instructions. If we do need to stop the session or suspend it for any reason, we use red lights and red flags. If you see a red light and a red flag out on circuit, please slow down to approximately 50% of your normal speed and make your way back into the pit lane in single file. So strictly no overtaking, please, under red flags. Back into the pit lane, we'll sort the problem out, get you going again as quickly as we possibly can. A red and yellow stripe flag means a change in circuit conditions. Typically that would be for something like lubricants on the circuit, which may change the level of grip. But on track days, we also use it to encompass things like debris on track. That could be dirt, anything that might affect your line out on track as well. So just be careful when you see that. When the problem's resolved itself, the flag will disappear and you'll know that grip levels should be back to normal. Blue flags. Now these are used for overtaking, and we're going to take overtaking as a totally separate issue in a few minutes' time. But the blue flag alerts you to the fact there's a quicker car coming up behind you. You need to be aware of it. Please check your mirror. It's just a memory jogger to keep an eye on what's happening behind you as well as what's going on ahead. So that's what the blue flag is. It's not a criticism of your driving. It just needs for you to be alert to what's happening behind. A black and white diagonally split flag means that we have your driving under observation for some reason. Maybe you're pushing the boundaries a little bit of the circuit. Maybe you're cutting the corners using more than just the track limits and the curbs, in which case we need to get you back into the pit lane to explain that and maybe tidy up those lines around the track for you. If you see that black and white diagonally split flag, if you don't do the same issue again, we won't take further issue. But if you do, we use a black flag, in which case we need you back into the pit lane straight away. So if you see a black flag, please slow down, make your way back into the pit lane. We'll explain to you very graphically what went wrong, and hopefully you won't do the same thing again. If you have a mechanical issue on circuit with the car, something wrong with the car, losing fluid or something, we use a black flag for that as well. So in which case, come back into the pit lane and we'll explain to you what we've seen. At the end of the sessions today, you'll see a checkered flag, motor racing's most famous flag. So when you see this go out at the start line, please slow down and make your way progressively back to the pit lane. By that I mean slow the car down progressively, make your way back to the pits. That allows the car the chance to cool down a little bit and for you as well. So by the time you're back into the pit lane, the session is over and the car should be in good state to drive home. Okay, and now a couple of specific track day rules which are very important to the running of the day and that you need to be very aware of. The first of which is overtaking. On a track day, we have to discipline overtaking. And at Anglesey Circuit, overtaking will only take place on the left-hand side. Very important indeed. Anybody who is being overtaken should make sure that they indicate to the right and let a quicker car go past on the left. And when we talk about overtaking, overtaking should only happen on the straights, not into the braking zones of corners and not actually in the corners themselves. Mixed abilities out on the circuit, it's important for people who've never been here before to concentrate on what's going on ahead of them rather than always looking in the mirrors, because otherwise they learn nothing during the course of the day if they're always under pressure. So this track day overtaking rule, very important indeed. Now, when you went out on your sighting laps, you would have noticed that there are two areas of the circuit where that overtaking rule might be compromised. So let's talk about that now. The first is when you enter the circuit. Clearly, anybody joining the track on the exit of the pit lane, on the approach to the banking, is going to be on the left-hand side. So in that area, we release that overtaking rule because somebody at speed coming through turn one clearly will need to pass you on the right-hand side. In which case, just maintain tight left-hand approach to the banking, let the quicker car go past on the right-hand side until you're clear of the banking, and then the rule goes back into place. The other area is on the approach back into the pit lane. If you're on the international circuit, making the approach down here towards bus stop, which is last corner, and where your pit lane entry is, as you can see from the circuit layout, you've got a long distance there. And it's a fast part of the circuit, so anybody at speed is going to inevitably want to pass somebody who's slowing down coming into the pit lane, in which case we have no problem with that. But if you are returning to the pit lane, please make very sure that you keep to the left-hand side and indicate well in advance so that the other cars know where you're going, and that way they can clear you before you get to that circuit. If we're using the coastal circuit, the shorter layout, you'll be approaching the pit lane through the corkscrew. Now clearly that's a pretty tight part of the circuit, In which case, as you come out of Peel Corner on the approach to the corkscrew, please keep to the left, indicate to the left, and then keep to the extreme outside of the circuit here, because we do allow cars then to overtake on the way into the last corner. So that's very important indeed. Indication, positioning of the car, and otherwise overtaking on the straights, not into the braking zones, not in the corners themselves. And our final point on these specific track day rules is lap timing. Many people are here to learn the circuit thinking they're going to go racing in the future. But under these rules for track days, to keep it safe, we have to insist that there is no lap timing. And if we do find people with a stopwatch and timing what they're doing, we do ask them to go home. So please, no lap timing, abide by the rules of the overtaking, and we'll have a safe day. Okay, so at this point, we know all the rules. We know the housekeeping, the administration, you know about the running of the day, what's going to happen out on track. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, something's bound to. Usually it's over enthusiasm. Somebody finding the brink of grip and having maybe a spin out on the circuit. In which case, what do you do? Well, if you spun and the car is still on the tarmac, there's a good chance you can make your way back into the session. Please, if you're going to do that, check around you, make sure the circuit is clear and rejoin the session safely. But then please come straight back into the pit lane, because unbeknown to you, it may be a problem with the car which has caused you to spin. You may think initially it's your driving expertise for a moment, but it may not be. It may be a deflating tyre. It may be liquid on a tyre, something like that that's caused an issue. Back into the pit lane, check it all over. If everything's fine, back out onto the circuit again. If you've left the circuit as a spin and got onto the grass runoff areas, just bear in mind grass is less grippy than the circuit itself. So in which case the car may travel further than you think. But if you manage to stop before you've reached a barrier or anything, there's a good chance you can make your way back out onto the track. In very wet conditions, that may not be quite as easy. So if you feel the car is bogging itself down, please just stay with it, put your hazard lights on, wave at the marshals, we'll know you have a problem. If you, however, can make it back to the track, drive to the edge of the circuit and rejoin safely, being very aware of where other cars are out on track, back into the pit lane. If the car has broken down on you for any reason, please do get it off the circuit, as far out of harm's way as you possibly can. And when you look around the barriers, you'll find that there are some orange squares, which is actually a point of safety for you. However, if the car has broken down and you're off the circuit, you're actually safer for the moment, actually still in the car with your seatbelt on and crash helmet on, whilst the marshals get the session under control using red flags. So unless there is a problem with a fire or something where you need to get out of the car, please stay in the car, wait for the marshal's assistance, and we'll recover you from there. Talking of recovery, this is an area where people can get into slight problems. Please, if you are being towed back into the paddock, strictly follow the instructions of the recovery agent. We have a proper recovery service here at Anglesey Circuit, so please make sure you follow their instructions. If you have a car which has a particularly high location for the towing, something like a kit car with a roll cage or a single-seater, please follow the instructions and follow in the wheel tracks of the recovery vehicle, perhaps just feathering the brakes to keep some degree of tension on the tow rope on your way back in. But gentle turns, following the wheel tracks of the recovery vehicle, very important indeed. Once you're back into the paddock, hopefully you can get the problem sorted out. Your problems are away and back out onto the track. And finally, a few paddock rules just to observe during the course of the day, please. Keep your speed down in the paddock. Lots of people, congestion. Make sure that that's safe. Talking about behind the pit garages, the area there is the fire lane. We need to keep that clear for access. Please make sure you keep all equipment and parking away from the fire lane. And for those of you latching into power from the garages with trailing leads, make sure they're properly covered to avoid any degree of trip and slip. And finally, if you could leave the circuit quietly, we would appreciate this, as we do respect the neighbours here in North Wales. And don't forget, keep to the speed limits, because it's very easy to forget after you've been driving at high speed out on track. Have a safe journey home, and we look forward to seeing you back here again soon.